Marc, welcome to this interview for Orange Magazine in the World Forum of Democracy here at the European Council. I would like to ask you straight away, social media is one of your main issues at The Economist as a journalist. So what do you consider it can contribute to the democracy?
Well, I think social media has a lot to bring to democracy. It allows citizens to have a voice, and that fundamentally is going to help democracy one way or the other. I think it's particularly important at the moment because lots of governments are doing difficult things. They're cutting back, they're having to impose controversial austerity measures on citizens, and they both need to make sure that citizens feel like they're having a say in what's going on, and they also need to indeed cut their own costs of working with citizens, doing consultations, and lots of e-democracy efforts are an attempt to not only improve the way that they talk to citizens, but actually cut the cost of doing so.
When you talk about e-democracy, how do you see that phenomenon?
Well, e-democracy is all sorts of things, and in fact lots of people for many years have been talking about it being the future for politics, the future for government. Up to now, it's to be honest, I think to some extent it's disappointed. There's been lots of people that thought e-democracy was going to have a huge impact, and slowly we're beginning to see what it can do. But e-democracy covers a whole range of things, so to some extent it's simply governments offering services online and therefore making it easier for citizens to interact with them in the daily ways that citizens need to. And on another level, it's about helping governments form policies using online means, and indeed eventually perhaps about voting online.
You think it could be a good idea to vote and to make petitions online even for the strongest government and not so developed democracies?
Perhaps, certainly. I think certainly there is a reason to think that it could make a big difference. There are reasons to be cautious about these developments too. The more you move democratic services online, the more you actually cut off a few people from using them. There is what they call a digital divide in many countries between the young who know how to use these systems, and indeed the rich who can afford to buy the computers and the tools you need to access these kinds of systems, and other people, the older people, the poorer people, the people who live in rural places where internet connections are poorer. So the one thing to make sure is that whenever you roll out these e-systems, you also make sure that you don't cut off the old ways that many citizens still interact with their governments. And there's still a question mark over whether rolling out these new programs actually helps broaden the type of people who take part in democracy. One reason people are so excited about them is because at the moment we're seeing a sort of crisis in democracy, in that party political membership is falling, and indeed turnout at elections is falling, especially among the young. Lots of people really hope that e-services, e-voting, e-petitions can help re-engage young people with the political process. And for now what we're seeing is actually that even when you make these things available online, the same people that were doing it before just find a new way of doing it. So what I mean by that is with petitions, for example, there's some research that suggests that the people filing e-petitions now are exactly the same kinds of people that were filing paper petitions before. And indeed with voting, we've seen that voting has made it easier for people who already vote to vote, but online voting is not actually for now encourage different kinds of people to vote. So while e-government can certainly make things easier for citizens, there's not really yet any proof that it's helping to broaden participation. So perhaps there are some deeper problems with politics that we need to solve first.
Which ones? Which ones would you
Well,
would
getting
you
to the
say?
bottom of why so many young people feel like they're not properly represented, or to some extent feel like the system doesn't work for them. I think there's a certain sense of desperation among many people, and especially we're seeing that in Europe, which has massive problems with youth unemployment. And I think there's a lack of trust, a loss of trust in the system. And I'm not sure how politicians can get that back, and perhaps once the economies start picking up again, that sense of crisis will fade. But for now, lots of citizens, lots of young people especially, don't feel like it's worth taking part in these political processes, whether they're online or offline, and that's a real worry for the continent.
A little worry also for the journalism field is sometimes to adapt to these new technologies and to be also helpful with the communication and the democracy. How do you consider that important?
So this is how can newspapers, what
Yeah.
difference does it make to us? Well, social media has been a big change for all newspapers. Newspapers are used to being the organisations that get to say, they get to write, they get to broadcast. Now they're finding that their readers are broadcasting as well and broadcasting back to them and telling them what they think about what they've written, and that's fairly new territory for journalists. But
The
I think
citizen journalism, right?
absolutely citizen journalism, but I think this is a big opportunity for journalists because, for one thing, we're managing to get coverage of places and of events that we've never been able to see before.
And fast.
And fast, so you can find out what's going on in places like Syria in a way that you never could do before, with all of the citizens there with their cameras and their reporting themselves, and that is a big change for newspapers. And I think the more information there is available, the more information is out there, actually the greater the need is for a couple of trusted organisations who can sift through it and pull out what's best and turn that into neat packages of content, effectively, that readers can read. And that's what The Economist does where I work. It's about sifting through all the things that have happened, not just telling you what's taken place, but telling you why it matters and what it means to you. And the more content, the more information is out there in social media, the more people, I think, are looking for some people who can make sense of it for them. So there's also a big opportunity for traditional news organisations.
You have been here as a guest speaker, also to represent The Economist where you work for. And as a journalist, how do you see this forum?
I think it's been an enormously useful forum. I've very much enjoyed it. As I said, there are big issues for politicians to deal with in Europe and indeed elsewhere, and the sooner we start talking about how to solve them, the better.
As a journalist, if you could make one question to the whole audience, what would it be?
That's a good question. If I could ask one question of all the people here today.
Yes. There are people from all over the world here representing the NGOs, the governments.
I think I would not ask them a question, but I would make a suggestion, and I would say, do not be complacent. Do not be complacent about your democracies. Now, there are lots of people here who aren't complacent about democracy because they've fought hard to win it. But there are lots of rich countries where democracy is well established, where it needs to be reinvigorated and revived. And I think I would hope that some of the people here would take that message away with them.
And the communication and journalism can help their democracies too?
Absolutely. I think journalism is essential to a strong democracy. Freedom of the press is essential to a strong democracy. And increasingly, freedom of speech on online platforms for citizens themselves is essential to keeping a democracy running well.
And internet worldwide too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Marc,
Thank you
for your interview. Thank you. Thank you.